how to create an epic countdown timer for any event using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. All of the source code for today's video will be available down below through the GitHub link. First, go ahead and open Visual Studio Code, which I already have open. Now I'm going to navigate to open folder using file at the top left, and I'm going to create a new folder where I want to go ahead and store this project. Once I have that folder created, I'm going to select it and click select folder. Once I am in here, the first thing I need to do is say that I trust the authors here. I can go ahead and close out of this welcome page. And over here in the file explorer, I'm going to start off by creating an index.html file. In my index.html, I'm going to create an exclamation mark, hit enter. That's going to create a boilerplate for us. And then I'm going to go ahead and title this document Kalman Web Design Countdown Timer, like so. Next, what I need to do is go back to the file explorer, and if you guys can't get to this for some reason, go ahead and click this icon and it will open it up for you. But I'm going to right click, and this time I'll create a folder and I'll call this styles, and inside of this styles folder I'm going to create a styles.css file, and here is where I'm going to create my CSS. But for now, all we're going to do is link this CSS page to our HTML page by using our link element like so, and you guys will see that Visual Studio Code helps us by setting up the rel equal to style sheet. And then since I'm going into another folder, I need to use // and then styles/styles.css right here. Next, I'm going to create another folder, and this folder is going to be called scripts, and inside of this scripts folder I want to create a file called scripts.js, and here is where we're going to house our JavaScript later in today's video. But for now, what I'm going to do is go back to the index.html, and I need to actually link this to our JavaScript page. So I'm going to create a script element here, and you can see Visual Studio Code helps us out. And in this case, we do need that closing tag here. Inside of this opening script tag here, we want to use our src, and then just like we did for our style sheet, we want to navigate to our scripts folder and then our scripts.js file. And since we're using JavaScript here, we also want to add the defer attribute because we need this to load after all our HTML and CSS. Next, what I'm going to do is create one more folder, and this is simply going to hold all of our images, and then I'm going to go ahead and paste an image within this folder. And now you guys can see that our image is within our images folder, and we're only going to be using one image for a background today. And the last thing I want to include in my head element here is going to be a Google font. If you guys need help or don't know how to use Google Fonts, I'll leave a link up top and down below for a video where I walk you through the entire process. And for now, that's going to be everything that we need in this head element. Now we need to navigate down to the body element here, and we want to start off by creating a main element with a class of snow-container. Inside of this main element, I'm going to create an h1, and this is going to be a Christmas countdown. And keep in mind, the way we're going to use the code today, you can use this for any event of choice. All you have to do is change the date in the JavaScript code once we get to that point. But I'm just going to be using Christmas as an example for you guys. Underneath that, we'll create a div with a class equal to countdown. Inside of this div, we'll create a div without any class or ID. And here we'll create an h3 element and say days. And here is where we're going to want to display our days. So underneath this, we'll create an h2 element. And for now, we simply want to put an asterisk right here. And now that we actually have some structure set up, what I'm going to do is go ahead and open my live server using Five-Server right here. And so you guys can see this while we're coding it. I'll go ahead and open up my Visual Studio Code on the left and my live server on the right. And you guys can see our basic structure is already set up with our h1, h3, and h2 element right here. And underneath our h2, I'm going to create an hr element with a class equal to hr-2, just like so. And this is just going to add some space down below for us, and we will style this in a moment. And for now, what we can do is go ahead and copy this and paste it 3 more times. And so now that I have 4 of these div elements, you guys can see that I need to change out the text. So for this second one here, this is going to be our hours. And for hours with our HR element, we're also going to include a class of red here. Next, we're going to update this one to minutes, and the last one is going to be seconds right here. And then we're also going to include that red class on the HR element right here. Now you guys can see that we successfully have our HTML structure set up and ready to go over here in our live server. What we can do is navigate to our styles.css, and it creates some more space. What I'm gonna do is close out the file explorer here. And we're gonna start off with our asterisk to create global styles. And here, all we need to have is a font family. And right here is where we can include our custom Google font like so. Next, we're going to target our body element, change our margin to 0 and our padding to 0 here. Next, we can go ahead and target our main element. We want to change our display to flex. If you guys need help understanding flex, I have an in-depth tutorial up top and down below for you guys if you want to check that out. And our flex direction here needs to be equal to column instead of the default row. Now you guys can see it looks better. We need to justify our content to the center, change our height to 100 view height to take up the entire view height of our device. Now we want to add a background image, so we'll go ahead and use the background image style, and this is going to take in a URL, and this URL is going to be where our image is at. So since we need to go outside of our styles folder and into our images folder, we need to use 2 dots followed by a slash followed by images, then our image right here. And now you guys can see that background image is present. Next, we need to change the position of this equal to relative and change our overflow to hidden here. And then just in case our image doesn't load for a second, we're going to add a background color of this hex value right here. But as you can see, it doesn't interfere with our image. This is just a backup. Next, we're going to target our H1 element, and we need to text align to the center here, change our font size to 4 rem, and change our margin to 0. Then we can target our H2 element, change our font size to something smaller like 3 rem, and our margin also needs to be 0. Target our H3 element, and here we just need to target our font size and make this 2 rem. Target our countdown class. We want to change our display to grid. If you guys need help understanding grid, I have an in-depth video all about grid. Leave a link up top and down below for you guys. Now we're going to go ahead and create grid template columns, and we're going to use repeat, create 4 columns at 1 FR each. And then we want to go ahead and text align to the center here. Next, we're going to go ahead and target our HR elements, change our height property to 0.5 rem, change our border radius to 0.5 rem, and either of these is going to be okay, whether you forget the 0 or include the 0 like I included it here. And then include our border, and we want to set this to none, and you'll see it disappear now. Next, we want to go ahead and target our HR-2 class, change our width to 18%, and we want to change our background color to this RGB green value. And then we want these little HR elements to alternate from green to red here. So what we're going to do is target our red class, simply include a background color here, and this is going to be an RGB red value. And you guys are going to see that this overrides our HR2 class styling because it comes after it here, and we only have it included on these two HR elements like so. And for smaller screen sizes like we're looking at over here on our live server, we want this grid to turn into 2 columns instead of 4. So what we're going to do is at the bottom of our CSS, we're going to create a media query, and we want to set our max width property here to 767 pixels. And on smaller devices, we want our font size to be a little bit smaller. So we'll target our HTML element, use our font size styling here and change that to 80%. And now you guys will see that if we shrink down, you guys will see our text shrink. And if we come back up, it goes back to the normal size. Now all we need to do here is target our countdown class one more time. And we want to change our grid template columns again. And we only want to have 2 columns. So we'll say 1 column here, followed by 1 more column. So now if we shrink down to, for example, mobile device size here, you guys will see that that collapses into a 2-column layout instead of the 4 columns, but we'll go ahead and change that back up to the proper sizing of a full screen device. Next, what we need to do is set up some styling for our snowflake animation. So to set this up, we're going to go above our media query and we're going to target our snowflake class. And don't worry, we haven't created this class yet, but we will in our JavaScript in a moment. So first we need to create a position and we need to change this to absolute. And we want to use our top property and make this minus 10 pixels, followed by a left value of 50%. And this is going to act as the default for our snowflakes here. And we're going to say we want a width of 10 pixels, followed by a height of 10 pixels. And then we want our background color to simply be white like snow. And then we want to create a border property, make our border 1 pixel. We want this to be solid, and our color for this is going to be a off-white color so you guys can see it on the screen a little bit easier. Now we're going to use our border radius property, set this to 50%, which is going to make our element a perfect circle. Next, we need to create our animation property, and the first value here is going to be the animation that we will create in a second, and we will call this our fall animation. We want to say that this is going to be a linear animation, and this is going to happen forever, so we'll set it to infinite. Then to make sure that this displays over everything on our screen, we want to use a z index of 1 here. Next, we're going to use our keyframes here so we can create our fall animation that we just tied into our snowflake class here. And first we need to set 0%, and at 0% we want to set our transform property to translate y, and we want this to be 0 because that's where we want it to start at 0%. And next we need to include 100% here, and this is also going to simply have a transform property of translate y, and we want this to move across the entire viewport height, so we're going to put in 100 VH here. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we set the default left to 50%, but we want all of the elements to spread across the page at a different left value, so we have it falling across the whole page here. So to do this, what we're going to do is use what's called a pseudo class selector. So this is going to start off with snowflake, and then we want to get the first instance of our snowflake class, meaning the first element that has this class attached to it in our HTML. So we'll say nth child and we'll put 1 right here. So for our first snowflake, we want the left value to be 10%, and we want the animation duration to be 8 seconds long. So we'll put 8 followed by S for seconds. And at this point, we can just copy this and paste it down below 4 more times. And then at this point, we just want to select our second snowflake, change the left value to 30 seconds, the animation duration to 5 seconds, select our third element, change this to our standard 50%, and change our duration to 6 seconds, target our fourth, and our fifth. Change our left to 70 here and 90 for our fifth, and 10 seconds and 7 seconds respectively. And now that's going to be all the CSS that you need to go ahead and make this work. Now we're going to go ahead and navigate to our scripts.js file. And first what we need to do is create a variable called target date, and we want to make this equal to a new date, and here is where you're going to want to get the date of the event that you want to count down to. And in our case, we want to go ahead and count down to Christmas time. So we want to put our month as 3 characters, our day as 2 characters here, followed by a comma. Put in the year of your event. So at this point, this is just the date of your event. And then we need to specify an exact time. So I'm just going to put 00 by 00 by 00, which is going to represent midnight, December 25th, 2024, and you guys can change this to whatever time you want. And from here, to show you guys what's going on with this built-in JavaScript date object, I'm going to use console.log and log out our target date variable. And now if I go ahead and open the console over here, you guys are going to see that it just logs out the time. But what we need to do so we can actually perform calculations to this date here is we need to use our getTime JavaScript built-in method here. And what this is going to do is it's going to give us the milliseconds here from January 1st, 1970 all the way up until the target date that we entered right here. So now we're logging out milliseconds here. And for now, I'll go ahead and delete this, but continue to use console.logs here if you guys get lost at any point, because it'll really help you out. Next, we want to be able to target each one of our days, hours, minutes, and seconds elements here. So what we need to do is go back to our index.html, and right here for our first H2 element, we want to include an ID equal to days. And we'll go ahead and copy this, paste it in for our hours, change this out to hours, do the same for our minutes here, change this to mins, and then go ahead and include it again for our seconds and change this to seconds. Now that we have these IDs set up, we can go back to our JavaScript file, and we need to create 4 variables to target each one of those elements here to dynamically change them every second so it updates correctly. So what we'll do is use our let keyword and create a variable called day_elem, and what we need to use here is our document.getElementById, and we want to get our days ID, and then we need to create another one down here. So we'll go ahead and copy this and just paste it down below. Change this to our_elem, change our ID to hours to get our hours, paste it again, change this to min_elem, and now we need to get our mins ID, and then we just need to do it one more time, but for our seconds. So we'll call this second_elem, and we need to get our seconds ID. Now we have a variable that's targeting each one of our elements here. What we need to do is create a variable using our let keyword called countdown timer, and we're going to make this equal to our set interval built-in JavaScript function here. And you guys will see that that sets up a callback function within our set interval JavaScript function. So what we need to do is first we need to change out the interval here. So this is going to be how often you want to refresh your code here. We want to refresh it every second, so we display down to the seconds the time remaining until our event. So to do this, we need to go ahead and put 1000, which is going to be how many milliseconds are in a second. And so now our function here is going to run every second. So it's going to refresh our page every second and correctly display the time. And with our set interval function here, we don't need to call this. It is automatically called when our code runs. Inside of here, we're going to create a variable called now, and here we want to create another date object, but for this one, we want to get the current date. So if we don't specify anything within our date object here, it's going to get the current time, meaning right now at the present moment. And we need to again get the milliseconds using our getTime built-in function. So if I use console.log to show our now variable over here in the console, you guys will see that it shows the milliseconds of the exact moment right now every second, because that's how often this function is going to run. And if we go ahead and take away this getTime function here, it will simply print the current time right here. But for now, we'll go ahead and change that back and get rid of our console.log. Next, we'll create another variable, and this one is going to be called our time diff. And here, we're going to be performing a basic calculation. So what we need to do is get our target date and subtract our now. So what we're gonna do is subtract the milliseconds of our target date. And so what we're doing here is subtracting the current time in milliseconds from the target date time in milliseconds. Now we're going to get into the exciting part. So we're going to create another variable called days, make this equal to math.floor. And this might look confusing, but all this does is let us use math, and then this just rounds down the number that we include within the parentheses. So what we need to do is get the amount of days remaining. So first we need to start off with our time diff variable, and we need to divide by days, but divide by days in milliseconds because this is in milliseconds here. So to calculate days in milliseconds, what we need to do is use parentheses here, put 1000 for milliseconds, multiply this by 60 by 60 again, and then by 24 here. So all this is doing is it's showing days in milliseconds. And now to actually display this dynamically onto our page, what we need to do is use our day_lem variable, change the inner text of this variable, and make that equal to our days variable. Now over here on the right, you guys can successfully see the correct days left until Christmas, and this is only going to display whole days. It's not going to display partial days. Now we need to do the same thing but for hours. So we'll go ahead and copy this, paste it down below, change our variable here to hours, and we obviously need to change our calculation here. So I'll delete all of this except for our time diff variable. And when I was doing it, I was running into a problem. So what I had to do was I had to subtract 1 hour right off the bat from our time diff. So to do this, I can use the minus sign and calculate an hour in milliseconds by multiplying 1000 by 60 by 60. And so all this is doing is subtracting 1 hour from the time diff variable here. Next, we need to use our modulus operator, which is basically the same thing as a division sign, but what this is going to do is it's going to divide, but it's going to give you the remaining value and not the quotient. And at this point, we're going to include the calculation that we used for our days here. And again, this just shows a day in milliseconds. And then we need to divide all of this by an hour. So we'll go ahead and use our hour here and just paste it like so. And I accidentally put the wrong division sign here. This needs to be a backslash. And now all I have to do is display this on the page. So I'll go ahead and copy and paste this down below, change this to our hour_lem, and then we want this to equal our hours like so. And then I accidentally messed up something very basic on this calculation. I need to go ahead and include this first calculation here in parentheses so it will run first before finding the remainder and then dividing here. And then here, for some reason, this element screwed up. This should just be our lm. And once I correct that, it will now be displaying the remaining whole days and whole hours. And then before we created this calculation for hours, I told you that I personally had a problem with it. But if you guys are not having the problem where it's including an extra hour, go ahead and use this calculation here. This is exactly the same, except we're not subtracting an hour up top here. Now we just need to set up our minutes and seconds. So we'll create a minutes element here. And at this point, our calculations are going to get much easier. And here we just need to use our time diff, subtract by hours and milliseconds. And here we can just go ahead and copy this from up top and just paste it right in here. Next, we can create our minutes variable here, and we want to make this equal to, again, math.floor. And for this calculation, we want to use our time diff again, but we want to find the remainder using the modulus operator, and we need to use our hour in milliseconds here again. So we'll just go ahead and paste it in. So at this point, we're going to use our time diff variable, divide it by an hour in milliseconds, but we only want to provide the remainder here. And after that, we simply want to divide by 1 minute in milliseconds. So we'll say 1000 times 60 for 1 minute in milliseconds. And then all we need to do here is use our min lm dot inner text and make this equal to minutes. And now we're going to display the proper minutes here. And now all we have to do is set up our seconds, which is what you're going to see refresh every second. So what we'll do is create one more variable up here called seconds, make this equal to math.floor so we can round down only for whole seconds. And here we want to use our time diff variable and find the remainder again using the modulus. And here we want to provide minutes in milliseconds again. So we'll say 1000 times 60. And then we need to divide all of this by 1000 to convert milliseconds back into seconds. And then at this point, we can just target our second lm dot inner text and make this equal to seconds. And now you guys can see that our countdown is successfully working over here down to the second. Now the last thing we want to do is create that epic animation that's going to look like snowfall falling down our page. So to do that, we are going to move on past all of this code up here. And just to remind you guys, I'm going to go back to my index.html and we're going to target our snow container class that we created earlier in today's video. So from here, we'll go back to our JavaScript file, create a constant variable called snow container, make this equal to document.query selector, and we want to get a class, so we need to make sure that we include our period here followed by the name of our class. And remember, we already created all of the styling and animations for our snowflake elements. So in our JavaScript file, all we're going to do is dynamically create each one of our snowflakes. So we'll do this by creating a function, and we're going to call this create snowflakes, and we're going to pass in a number. So this is going to be how many snowflakes we want to create on our page. And all we need to do here is create a for loop, and we're just going to use the standard of I and make that equal to 0. And we want this to run when I is less than number. And then we want to increment the loop each time. And inside of this for loop, we'll create a constant variable called snowflake. Make this equal to document.create element. And here, all we need to do is create a div element for each one of our snowflakes. And after we create that snowflake div, we need to target it, use .classList, and we want to add the class of snowflake. And remember, this is what we created in our styles.css right here. And what we want to do is add this to our snow container at the beginning. So we'll use prepend. If you guys want it at the end, just use append, and we just need to prepend our snowflake variable here. Now this is not doing anything because we haven't called the function yet, so down below I'll go ahead and call the create snowflakes function, and I want to create exactly 5 snowflakes. And at this point, you guys can see now that our snowflake animation is happening, and we have our simple snowflakes falling down the screen at different speeds and at different times. Congratulations, you have just learned how to create an event countdown timer using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And again, you can change this to any event that you guys want to count down to. If you guys need any help today, reach out to me directly through the comments or go to my website at kalmanwebdesign.com, and I will help you guys out for free. And I hope this video helped out. Thanks so much for watching.